Actually, that's what I want to ask you. Everyone always asks me, which I don't know the answer because I'm not a VFX soup or a recruiter, how long should a reel be?
The rule of thumb, at least in visual effects, is that it should never be longer than 2 minutes. And even at 2 minutes, most reviewers aren't going to get to the end. They're going to see, in some cases, just the first 20 or 30 seconds before they either have made a decision to keep watching another at least minute or so, or let's move on to the next one. This isn't the position for them. So keeping it under 2 minutes is important. No one is going to sit through a 10-minute reel. No matter how great your stuff is, the reviewer is looking at dozens or even hundreds of reels, and if they're all 2 minutes, that's days worth of work just to get through them. And so there's no way they're going to sit through 10-minute or even a 5-minute reel because they just simply don't have time. There's just too many to look at. So 2 minutes is the rule of thumb, or under, and you don't need to pad it. So if you only have a minute and a quarter or a minute and a half worth of great stuff, don't feel like you've got to fill that last half a minute with stuff that you're not super proud of, because that thing that you're not super proud of might be the thing that really catches the eye of the recruiter, and they think, oh, well, that's not very good. Let's move on. Let's try somebody else. Just include your best stuff. And the rule of thumb generally is when you're applying for a position, put your best stuff in the beginning. I know that it feels like you're what's a
top loading?
Top loading. That's a good one. But it's important because, like I said, they're moving through these things quickly, and if you don't have something in the front that is going to catch their attention and really prove that you're a good candidate for this role, they may move on. So don't save your best stuff for the last because they might not see it.
Yeah. A few more questions about the reel. Should it be on YouTube? Should it be on Vimeo? Should it be a DVD, a CD-ROM? Joking. Videotape? Like, where should you be able to view it?
I mean, back in the day, it used to be a thing where you would mail out reels, through the post, and employers would receive these stacks of DVDs and things like that. These days, don't do that. They'll almost always just end up in the garbage. No one has a DVD player around anymore, So they should always be a completely digital submission. If you're submitting to a bigger company like ILM or Weta or something like that, they'll often have their own system set up for submitting a reel through their website or something like that. If you're submitting to a smaller company that doesn't have a system set up like that, it's usually best to link to your reel. Don't try and submit the whole file. Just link to it, and that could be on a private website, or it could be on Vimeo or something like that. Just make sure it works. Make sure the link works before you submit it. That's like, that's worse than submitting your resume with a typo in it. You're submitting your demo reel for them to look at, and if they can't see it, you have no chance. That's something I should point out too. You do often submit a resume, but the recruiters and the employers generally don't look at the resumes until they've already looked through all the reels and they've whittled the pool down a bit. So they've already got some candidates that they like. Then they start looking at the resumes and finding out, if you're just out of school or if you've had any career experience already. Those things can have an effect. But like I said, the things like schooling and grades and attendance records and whether you were captain of the football team or any of those things are very unimportant. They'll look at your resume mostly to get your contact information and to some extent your career experience.
Last two quick questions about reels, and then I'm actually going to open it up to questions because I think we've got a few in the room, hopefully, but also from online. in the reel, is music important? And also, is labeling what you did on a shot important?
Yes, for sure. To the second one. The first one, music, not so much. So I think this is kind of divisive, but I think it's important to have music on your reel. Just make sure that it's nothing that's going to pull someone out of watching your reel. You know, if it's thrash metal or something that is just going to turn somebody out there completely off, that's not something you want to include in your reel. My rule of thumb would just be say that there should be no singing, no lyrics, no words whatsoever, just music. And you should be aware that most reviewers are going to watch them without the sound turned on. So I would say 9 out of 10 submissions that you put out there, no one will hear the music that you've chosen. There's only going to be that 1 or 2 that actually do listen to it, or that have any reason to hear it. But for them, you want to make sure there's something, just nothing that's offensive in any way. And then the second part was the
labeling of the work.
Labeling, yes. So that is very important. So when you're submitting a reel, the reel that I just showed you is what would be more considered a sizzle reel, where you're just showing things that you've done. I'm not applying for a job. I'm not submitting it to a reviewer. If I were, I would resequence things a bit. I would put my best stuff in the front, and I would label everything. So that can either be done on screen with text, or it can be a supplemental text file that gives a real breakdown. So you want to have want to have one or the other, or both. That's fine too. You want to make sure that whoever you're sending this to is 100% certain of what you did in the shot and what you didn't do. So if you were the comper in the shot, that needs to be clearly spelled out. If you were the comper and the modeler, you want to have that clear too. If you did everything in the shot, still break it down. Say there was a comper, there was a modeler, there was a rigger, and they were all me. Put your name for all of those credits. But you don't want to leave any question to them. You don't want them to think, do you think they did the droid? Because I really liked the droid, but the other,
not have done it.
But but they don't know for sure if you did it or not. And if you didn't do it, and they've called you in for an interview, and they find out that you didn't do that thing that they really loved, that's going to be a huge letdown and like a red flag for you and your candidacy. So you want everyone to be on the same page with what you did and what you didn't do. And you also don't want to steal credit from anybody. It's a big industry, but it's also a small industry in some regards.
Especially if multiple people are applying for the same job and seem to have the same shot on their reel and seem to describe the fact that they both comped it, which I know can happen depending on the setup. But it can be. And
there have been horror stories about candidates who have put a shot on the reel and someone from the company they're applying to actually did the shot. And is often in the interview with them, and that's a nightmare scenario. Don't try to steal someone else's work. The word will get around.
Yeah.